Sabres are connected to two rumors in the last couple of days, and we've got a free agent idea of the day, Max Domi, all ahead here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. This is take 2 of the Locked On Sabres podcast with Sneaky Joe here on this Tuesday because I lost power in the middle of take 1. Was about 20 minutes in, so had a practice run. Here you go. Take 2, Skinner buyout, Logan Couture as a trade rumor, Max Domi as a free agent idea of the day. All on tap for you today here on today's show. As always, if you want to get connected with the show, be sure to do that by heading over to our Locked On Sabres text line. You can shoot us a text there. If you are not already signed up for that, you could sign up by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. Of course, you could always comment on our YouTube channel as well or on Twitter at Locked On Sabres. Our latest show from last week on Patrick Kane as a free agent idea was met with a lot of resistance, which I appreciate that there is still resistance to. I don't want this guy just because he was here. I don't care that he's from here. I don't care that he's from here. I'm sick of waiting around for him to decide I want to be a Buffalo Sabre. He's had opportunity. He doesn't want to do it. Get over it. I like that take. I think the player and the motivation of the team fits. It's up to him. I would bet against it happening because of that. The reason, of course, that we'll monitor his comings and goings in the summer is because I believe the Sabres are going to be in on him. So we can argue about the merit of the idea, but I'd be very surprised if the Sabres think that he's not worth signing. We'll see how motivated, though, they truly want to be. That was our last show. If you missed that, be sure to check it out wherever you're listening to this podcast, in the feed or on our YouTube channel as well. So we'll get into some rumors. The Stanley Cup Final tonight, probably happening as you're listening to this, or maybe has already happened. Game 5 between the Panthers and the Oilers. We'll see what happens. Maybe we get Kyle Okposo and Montour and Reinhart and Rodriguez and all these former Sabres lifting the cup tonight, or maybe we'll get a Game 6. Who knows? I'll just say this about the cup. And again, it's probably happened by the time you're listening. If Edmonton loses, maybe this is more in if they were to lose in 6 or were to lose in 7. I think there's a real case for Connor McDavid winning the Conn Smythe, despite losing the series. That has not happened where a losing player has won MVP of the playoffs, the Conn Smythe, since J.S. Jaguar in 2003. It has not happened since then. I think this would merit it, though. McDavid leads the series in points. He just set the all-time NHL record for assists in a postseason. Broke a Wayne Gretzky record with 32, especially if he breaks the all-time point record. He's 9 away from Gretzky. That's a lot. He would have to have a hell of a few games here to even match Gretzky's all-time point record in a postseason. But if he were to get there and they still lose somehow, maybe they have another big win in Game 5 and Game 6 and they lose Game 7 and he ties Gretzky or passes Gretzky for most points ever and they lose the series. I think he should win Conn Smythe. I think there are pathways for that to happening. I think Barkov, though, is going to win it. Right now, that would be my betting favorite. Depends where you look. Some of the odds have Bobrovsky. Some of them have Barkov, but they're usually right there neck and neck for 1 and 2. Jeff Skinner. Let's start off the show, the Sabre end of today, with Jeff Skinner. There's really nothing in the news that's concrete other than Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in Finland hit an albatross. And if you're not a golfer, what an albatross is in golf is a 2 on a par 5. So Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who was at a Finnish League alumni tournament, and like the biggest country or the best country club in Finland. He has a par 5 driver, he must hit it a mile. Second shot on a par 5 is usually more than 200 yards, sometimes 250 or even more than that. This usually eagle is what you're going for at a best case scenario on a par 5. He makes the second shot from 200 plus yards away. Albatross. How rare is an albatross? I think you could honestly say an albatross is more unlikely than reaching the NHL as a goaltender. I won't say it's more impressive because there's a lot more work that goes into being an NHL goaltender. I think it's the odds are longer for an albatross than making the NHL as a goaltender. There have been 130 albatrosses on the PGA Tour since 1983. In that same amount of time, there have been 1,400 holes in ones. So keep that in mind. What Luukkonen did in golf yesterday was 10 times less likely than a hole in one. You would expect to have 10, by the odds, 10 hole-in-ones before your first albatross in golf. So what he did is unbelievable. If you're not a golfer, I tried to express how incredible it is that UPL did that. That's all that happened news-wise with the Sabres. The other news is rumors. We have 2 rumors in the last couple of days on the Sabres. And let's start with the internal rumor. Elliot Friedman, Jeff Merrick on their radio show today talking about a Jeff Skinner buyout. And we have had some local talk about Jeff Skinner as a buyout candidate. And I've told you on this show that I could see them doing it. And I think that one of 2 things needs to happen with Jeff Skinner. You either need to create a spot for him in the top 6 to have that continue, or buy him out. That's it. Anything else, I guess you could trade him. If you find a trade partner, then of course that's the best case. But playing him in the bottom 6 to me wastes everybody's time and does nothing to improve the Sabres. I think that's the worst case scenario. I think buying him out, very possible though. Now the window for the buyout opens, I believe Merrick said it's 24 hours after the finals end. So it could be tomorrow. We'll see when this actually opens up and whether the Sabres will actually do it. What Friedman said is, quote, the word is definitely out there that a Skinner buyout is a possibility. And they went through the merits of it and how the Sabres will be open to it. But really, what Friedman is doing there, and because of where Friedman is plugged in the league, I think because you've heard more and more local talk about Skinner as a buyout possibility, the local talk makes me think, not just the talk, but even like some of the beat guys talking about it, makes me think those guys have some reason to believe that they would do it. Now, Friedman talking this way about it makes me think that other executives that work for other teams in the NHL, they think the Sabres can do it as well. So I think you've got both to be true now. I think because of the local reporting on it and talking about it, I think you have some reason to believe the Sabres are open to it. And then you have Friedman talking about it, which makes me think that executives in the league think they might do it. So I've got 2 different angles now of 2 different groups of people, if you will, that make me think that this could actually happen. So just to reset my opinion on it, got to be top 6 or buy him out. I think that the struggles that Jeff Skinner had last year are overstated. No doubt at all, he was horrible defensively. There was that 3-on-3 play late in the season that was one of the worst effort plays that I've seen. Or maybe it wasn't even effort. It was just he mentally froze in a 3-on-3 overtime because he's bad at 3-on-3 overtime. But he did. And he had a horrible defensive season, one of the worst defensive players in the National Hockey League. His ability as a creator sunk. He did not repeat what he did 2 years ago, where he set a career high in assists and a career high in points by 20 plus. But Jeff Skinner last season was what Jeff Skinner has always been. And I do not see the massive cliff. Do I see a small decline? I do see that. But the cliff, a rapid descent to irrelevancy, not there. Skinner was what he normally is. A streaky goal scorer, better at 5-on-5 than power play, that is reliant on a star center. That has always been Jeff Skinner. It will always be Jeff Skinner. Exactly 3 months ago today, March 18th, 3 months ago today, Jeff Skinner, this was a team, by the way, that struggled to score goals. Jeff Skinner, 3 months ago, led the Buffalo Sabres in goals with 24 goals in 61 games. That is a 32 goal pace over 82 games for Jeff Skinner. Most of that playing on the top line. He was moved to the bottom 6. He had no goals in his final 12 games. Now, that's no surprise. Name me a single time in his career. And this is a criticism of him too, by the way. It's a defense of Skinner, but it's also a criticism. It's just what he is. There's no mystery here. Show me a time in his career where he played with a center that wasn't a top 6 center, a legit top 6 guy, and he produced. It's never happened. Peyton Krebs, I defended him because I wanted to see him with skilled players. We saw it. He's not good. He's not a good creator. He's not ready to be a top 6 player. And Skinner didn't score with him. That's what that will look like if he's in the bottom 6. If he's in the top 6, you could be frustrated with him, but he might score you 30 goals like he was probably on his way to doing. I wonder how different we'd be talking about Skinner if Granato had not moved him off the top line and he had, in the final 12 games, one more goal streak. One more 3-4 game hot streak where he got 3 or 4 more goals and ended the season with 28 instead of 24. Because I think the narrative about Skinner would sound a little bit different. Again, none of this for me, though, is to say I don't think they should buy him out. I think buying him out is completely defensible, and I do not think it's actually that cost prohibitive. The thing you might be most concerned about with a Skinner buyout is the third year of the buyout. If you look at Skinner's buyout, year 1, the Sabres saved $7.5 million. Instead of a $9 million cap hit, it's about 1.4. Year 2, it's about 4.5. Year 3, it's 6.5. That's the big number, $6.5 million. But let me put your mind at ease about that figure. Oh, I want to be good in 3 years. I don't want to be paying $6.5 million to a guy that's not on my team. Let me ask you a question. At that point in time, Jeff Skinner will be 35 years old. Would you rather have a 35-year-old Jeff Skinner on your roster for $9 million, or would you rather have Jeff Skinner not on your roster for $6.5 million? I think you could very easily say, in fact, most probably would say, and even I would tell you, oh yeah, I'd rather not have him on the team in 3 years and gain the extra $2.5 million. I'm actually still saving money, even in the biggest year. And then the 3 years after that, which is the length of it that makes it a 6-year buyout, $2.5 million. I'm not worried about $2.5 million. I could work around that. That's not a big number. I think the Skinner buyout is not unlikely at all. And I think there's a real good defense for it. And let me put a concrete opinion down because I think I'm a little back and forth on Skinner. I want to defend him. Because I just don't know why everyone got so mad at him all of a sudden. There's nothing changed about him. He was the exact player last year that I think he's really always been. Maybe he set expectation too high because 2 years ago he had a season with assists that he's never, ever had before, and maybe we thought he could do that every year. I don't know. I want to defend Skinner. And I also kind of land in thinking buyout's the best option. I think if I were Kevin Adams and I had to look at this coldly, I think I buy him out. I think number one is buy him out because sure, I think on the top 6, he'd do fine. He'd score 25, 30 goals again. But can I get better? I think the answer is yes. Do I want to have a more complete player? I think the answer is yes. Do I want to eliminate the risk of a top 6 player if he has another decline next year? I think eliminating that risk and filling it with Peterka on the top line is better, and then filling the bottom 6 with someone who's more capable of moving around the lineup, someone that's better on the power play. Skinner's never been good on the power play. I think all these answers are yes. So although I want to defend him, I think the opinion I land on is that the best option is buying him out. And the more the offseason kind of trickles in here, the more we hear from Friedman's, the more we hear from the beat guys here locally, I think the more I think that they're actually going to do it. And maybe we find out this week if they're actually going to do it, and Skinner's career ends after 6 years with the Buffalo Sabres. That's the Skinner rumor. When we come back, a Logan Couture rumor where the Sabres were mentioned. We'll talk about that when we return here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show by Policygenius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknowns. Policygenius, the country's leading online insurance marketplace, makes choosing the right policy for your family quick and easy. Policygenius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policygenius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Get a peace of mind by finding the right life insurance policy with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes. See how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. Back on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We'll keep going through some free agent ideas of the day on our next show. We're going to talk about Chandler Stevenson at some point coming up here. I'm excited to talk about him as an option for the Buffalo Sabres as a third-line center, a really quality third-line center option. And that is who we're talking about next, the idea of that, but not free agency, trade option. Dave Pagnotta from the fourth period, who's hit on some stuff and has some rumor stuff too, but has been very plugged in the league for many years now as an insider. He wrote about Logan Couture earlier in the week that Couture had interest last season around the trade deadline. He was injured, only played 6 games, but he had interest nonetheless. And one of the teams he mentioned that inquired about Logan Couture were the Sabres. Couture is Southern Ontario kid who, shouldn't call him a kid, 35 years old, but Southern Ontario guy, Guelph, Ontario, big Bills fan. Like, maybe he's more known as a Bills fan than any other player in the NHL. And there's a lot of them, like Marner's one, I think. But Couture is a Bills fan. That's always been known about him. So it would be him returning about as close to home as he could get without really going to Toronto. And even then, I think it's about equal distance. So Logan Couture, 35 years old, 3 years left in his contract at $8 million per year. Now, part of the Pagnotta report wasn't just that the Sabres inquired about him. It was that he thinks teams are going to circle back once Couture starts skating again and gets healthy this offseason. And he said that he mentioned the Sabres as a team he could see recircling on Couture. The other teams he mentioned, by the way, were Nashville and Ottawa that inquired on him and that he could see circling back. Now, just to point out, though, and this doesn't have to mean anything because GMs say this all the time and then they'll go the other way. Mike Greer said Couture is not going anywhere, that the rumor was false. GMs say that a lot. Kevin Adams said the Sabres weren't shopping Casey Middlestat over and over and over and over, and then they traded Casey Middlestat. So you never know what's actually happening there behind the scenes and whether Couture wants to play somewhere else. The Sharks are going to be horrible for a few more years. At 35 years old, he might want a different situation. So, what about the merit, though, of this idea? Again, the contract's not good. $8 million for the next 3 seasons. Basically, it's the Skinner contract. Only $1 million less. It's the same term. It's basically replacing the Skinner contract with another Skinner contract. The difference, I would say, though, with Couture is if the Sabres were able to get this deal done, and I think because of the salary and because of his age and because of where the Sharks are, even if you want it, like, I don't know. I think a Couture-Skinner swap actually makes sense. I made the case for Skinner to the Sharks last week. The problem there is you got to get Skinner to sign off on it. But if he did, Couture, Skinner, maybe, and you throw them a pick on top of it, makes sense as a trade because the salary, if it could equal out there, Couture fits the Sabres roster a lot better than Skinner does. He would be your third-line center immediately. Like, instant upgrade over Peyton Krebs to be your third-line center. He's probably better than anybody you'd expect the Sabres to get in free agency for this as well. Again, only 6 games last year, but the year prior, his age 33 season, 27 goals, 40 assists for 67 points. So the last time he played, he was a very good top 6 center. And the Sabres would probably be asking him to be more of a third-line center, but he could play wing, he could play down the middle, he moves around the lineup. That's the difference between him and Skinner. Skinner, I think there's one spot in the lineup that he really can play. Couture, I think, can kind of play everywhere. Now, he is not as good defensively as maybe his reputation provides him. He's kind of he's had a rough couple years in his own end. But veteran player, I might trust that he can get back on track in that department a little bit and be a steady veteran voice in the locker room that can also perform, help him out on the power play. Maybe he can improve defensively. I think Couture is a good idea for the Sabres, given that he probably won't cost a ton. But the way Greer's talking, maybe he's trying to get a better price, good price for him. So that's the Couture rumor, that the Sabres inquired about him and they might circle back. And why they inquired on him in the first place, I think all of what I just said about him being depth down the middle, versatility to play throughout the lineup, veteran player, can help in the locker room with that. If you think the Sabres need a little bit more of that to replace Okposo and maybe Girgensons, I think Couture checks a lot of boxes for them. And big name, if you care about the marketing element or you care about the excitement of the fans, trading for Logan Couture, that's a name most Sabre fans know. Most even casual, maybe more hardcore hockey fans, but even some casual fans, they know of Logan Couture. It's a juicy idea, I think, for sure, him coming to the Sabres in a trade this summer. And I don't want to believe Greer all the way. I think if even it's not Buffalo, I think he's going to find his way to a different team at this age, trying to be on a competitive team at least one more time. When we come back, if it's not Couture, free agent idea of the day. We're going to stick with third line center. What about Max Domi? Let's talk about Ty Domi's son, Max Domi, who's bounced around a lot as an idea on a 1-year or a short-term contract with the Sabres. That's when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Okay, so the NBA Finals is over, but no shortage of things going on right now in the world of sports. I mean, you're going to have baseball, of course, all the way through the fall, but we'll see. You might have the Stanley Cup final going to a Game 6. We'll see tonight, but big time for the year for soccer. You've got the Euros going on. You've got Copa America starting on Thursday. I had some action down on the game today between Czechia and Portugal, which was a great game that went all the way to the end. Ronaldo, I was looking at for an anytime prop for first goal scorer. And if you're not a soccer fan, you like golf, you just did the U.S. Open wrap up. Couple of weeks away, you get the British Open, or the Open Championship, I should say, coming up as well. So no shortage of things to look at over at FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers right now on FanDuel get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $200 you can use to bet everything from Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Final segment, Locked On Sabres podcast. First listen every day. Thanks for making it that. And at Sneaky Joe Sports, you want to follow me on Twitter. Next up is the NHL Draft, of course. We're about 9 days away from that. We're going to talk with Hadi Kalakash next week, get the full scope of things when it comes to prospects the Sabres could be looking at number 11. And we'll talk, all next week's going to be about prospects and trades for the NHL Draft. So that's coming your way next week. And then we'll get some more free agency content in, because we're getting close, 2 weeks basically from free agency. Speaking of free agency, free agent idea of the day. How about Max Domi as an idea? Now, we had Couture to talk about and Skinner. So I wanted to save Stevenson some of the bigger ideas for when we could spend more than one segment on this, but Domi feels like a one segment guy, because Domi is probably going to be short-term contract. He has been signing 1-year deals. He just did that with Toronto last year. He's bounced around to a lot of different teams. Since 20, I mean, really, I think that's say since 2020. How about just for his entire career? He has played now for 7 teams in 9 years. 7 teams in 9 years. His first 3 seasons in Arizona, and then 6 in the last 6. 6 teams in the last 6 years. Montreal, Columbus, Carolina, Chicago, Dallas, and then last year, Toronto. He's been all over the place. And there's some personality stuff there, right? Like maybe that was happening in Columbus a little bit with him and being a little bit of a headache in their locker room, but I have not heard that about any other stop that he's had. And Columbus is weird with players like that, so maybe that was a Columbus thing. The reason I wanted to mention him and talk about him is one word that Kevin Adams used when talking about his lineup, players he wants to find, and specifically his bottom 6 this offseason. Adams said he wants to get players that are more abrasive. And what does abrasive mean? I mean, you might think a little bit more aggressive, right? A little bit more in your face, maybe a little bit more of what the Florida Panthers have in this playoff. They have a whole team of it. And that's Max Domi. Max Domi is absolutely that type of player. Max Domi, even though he is a smaller forward, of course, at 5'10", 195 pounds, he's an in-your-face guy. He is Sam Bennett is a big idea Sabre fans have for a trade this offseason. I feel like Domi in some ways is a poor man's Sam Bennett. I think there are big differences in their games. But in terms of their tone, their vibe, the way they want to play the sport, I think they have similarities there where they are just annoying to play against. I think Bennett's a much better player in his own end than Domi is, which I think is a massive, massive difference. And Bennett's been a better goal scorer recently, which is why I think Bennett is a commodity this offseason. Domi's probably signing another one-year contract somewhere. But what we got last year from Max Domi, 28 years old, he played a lot of wing recently in his NHL career. He's always been able to do a little bit of both. Last year, he played a lot of center. First week of November, Toronto, who had signed him to play on the wing, put him at center. He played there for a while. He ended the season at center. Now, one thing Domi struggled with down the middle that he's kind of struggled with a lot in his career is defensive play. He was not all that strong defensively. And if you're looking for a third-line center for the Sabres, you might be thinking, oh, shutdown guy. I'm not sure Domi's going to give you that, but he might give you a bunch of other elements that you would hope to have in a third-line center. And maybe you let Krebs continue to develop into just a defensive stalwart at center, and that's all he can do. Domi last year, 47 points. Played with some skilled guys, though. Played in the top 6 in Toronto a lot. 9 goals, 38 assists. Year prior to that, between Chicago and Dallas, 20 goals, 36 assists for a 56-point season. So back-to-back years with some pretty solid production, 56 points and 47 points. Some of the advanced numbers match up with that as a pretty good offensive player. You might want a little bit more defensively. And he's going to be in your face. He sucker punched guys before. He did that to Aaron Ekblad a few years ago. And I'm saying that as something that you might want in the Sabres lineup a little bit. Someone that might be capable of doing that once every 3 years because he's just always involved in stuff. That attitude is what you might be looking for in a Max Domi, in someone that, let's be real, you probably can't get the top free agent. You got to go bargain binning, shopping a little bit. You got to go to the clearance aisle. And I think Domi is in that clearance aisle. And you might have to overpay him, but that's how you get a guy like that. Hey, Max, you don't have to move all that far away. You just played in Toronto. We're going to bring you in, and your dad played in Toronto, right? So he would have lived there a lot as a kid. So you're just moving a couple hours away from there, and we're going to pay you more than these other teams are because we have cap space, and we can't get the top guys, and we got to use our money somewhere. So here we go. Here's $3.5 million. How's that? 1-year deal, $3.5 million. Or maybe the Sabres would be the team to be willing to operate on giving him a multi-year contract when other teams would not be willing to, and that's how you get Max Domi. Last year, Domi's contract with the Maple Leafs was a 1-year deal for $3 million. You'd be giving him a slight raise. Maybe you have to go to 4, or maybe go 2 years, $3 million, something like that. Not a terrible idea. Not an impossible idea. Would not be surprised if they made this move. He's got versatility. You might think he's better off on the wing. He's not perfect in that regard. He can play center. He did play center last season. It's not maybe the perfect fit, but it's a fit. It's not a perfect fit, but it's a fit. And I would not be surprised if the Sabres were to bring him in. So Max Domi, free agent idea of the day for today. Some bigger ideas coming up on the next couple of shows. I do think Chandler Stevenson's an interesting name to talk about. We'll do that coming up. And then get some draft stuff, some other free agency stuff as we rock and roll towards the draft and free agency in the next couple of weeks. Tomorrow is the 25th anniversary of No Goal. Game 6, Sabres and Stars. Next show, we'll talk plenty about that. It's the one element I feel bad about. Like, I want to be able to do a show remembering that night. Like, when Shope and the Bulldog come on the air tomorrow, I can't wait to listen to the memories and how that night was and what, people's mindset was and when they saw that the goal shouldn't have counted and all sorts of things like that. I mean, I'm watching that game, but I'm 4 years old. I don't remember it. So I don't have memories of it. I don't remember hearing stories. I know I've heard stories about Lindy charging out on the bench, yelling at Bettman, and when people were leaving the arena, finding out that it shouldn't have counted. Just the rally. A lot of good memories. We'll be digesting that tomorrow, and we'll still talk plenty about No Goal and it being the 25th anniversary of 1999, the Stanley Cup Finals. So that'll be on our next show. Stay tuned. If you've got a memory of 99, I would love to hear it and read it on the show. Our text line, you could do that. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres if you're not already a texter. Share your memories on YouTube and this video and description if you want. We'll read them there. And then on my Twitter at Sneaky Joe Sports or at Locked On Sabres. Would love some memories of the 25th anniversary of No Goal. That'll be our next show. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time here in the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.